Hey everyone, it's Miserable Movie Man back once again with another video. So, Season 2 of Peacemaker just wrapped, and I just finished watching it the other day. This has caused a lot of strong opinions on the internet, and I wanted to provide my own. I am obviously a big fan of DC Comics, more so the older films and the actual comics themselves that I grew up reading. But, you know, they do try to do decent shows. The animated universe was amazing when it first came out. I think that's tailed off a bit lately. And with James Gunn and Peter Safran in charge, it has taken a slightly different turn to, obviously, how Snyder had envisioned things. And Peacemaker is prime evidence of that. I think Season 1 was an interesting take on Peacemaker after the events of Suicide Squad. Had some fun characters, a reasonable plot, and, you know, a lot of sort of enjoyable moments throughout the show. Season 2, for me, fell fairly short of that bar. There were some great moments, I think, scattered throughout, but for me, there were few and far between. And maybe the ending is setting up, you know, more events in the DC Universe films, or perhaps, you know, Season 3 of Peacemaker, but the ending was particularly underwhelming for me. And, of course, it was one of those things that maybe James Gunn has a long-term plan for, but let's see. I think most people thought the ending was underwhelming. The season finale is the lowest-rated episode on IMDb, so clearly other people have thought the same thing. And by the way, this review has spoilers ahead, so if you haven't seen it yet, especially the last episode, go watch that first and then come back and watch the video. I mean, when he went through the doorways at the start, after he was a bit, you know, depressed about where he was going, and he saw himself, and then ended up following himself, and then ended up, you know, killing himself. We've seen a lot of this stuff before in the Flash TV show, you know, even in Shazam, where there's sort of other universes that people are going to. So none of that was new. I think, you know, the twist at the end revealing that it was actually a Nazi parallel world, we've seen that before. It's been prevalent in the comics, and it's one of those things that if you pay attention a little bit early on, you can kind of tell that something's not quite right. It's not quite a perfect world. But a lot of this season was about Peacemaker, who he is, why he is, you know, him coming to terms with all the things going on, and really sort of growing a little bit as a character. Obviously, he starts off trying to join the Justice Gang. We have a bit of a pointless comedy scene for me, just an excuse to shoehorn in a few cameos. And I'll get to the cameos a bit later for the other ones that obviously were there in the show. But yeah, it was almost as if James Gunn wanted a filler season, something to, you know, get a bit more to the heart of who Peacemaker could be going forwards, and really give him a purpose. But he didn't want to do that relatively quickly, and he wanted Peacemaker to confront some of his demons and some of the trauma. But of course, I think it's created even more trauma now that he saw how his dad could have been, even though maybe his dad was living in the Nazi world. He saw how his brother could have been, and they're both gone now as well. Although, is his brother really gone? Is his brother going to turn into some crazy supervillain? Maybe his brother will turn into Monarch and go back in time and try and change things. That could be an option instead of the really poor, you know, Hawk version that we got in the comics. If anyone's read Armageddon and 2001, all of those things, 0 Hour, etc. So yeah, if his brother becomes Monarch and is sort of manipulating events in the background, that would be really cool for me. But I don't know if that's going to happen. Probably they'll just take a more simple revenge plot. It seems that his brother survived, and having Peacemaker go through seeing what it could have been with Harcourt, in that respect, was again, they played a lot on those emotions, and those emotions were coming out throughout the show, but it dragged on a bit for me, you know, and you get that he went in, and Chris went in and just wanted to experience happiness, wanted to experience, you know, a different life than the one he was given. The thing with the alien and the doorways and all that, I mean, James Gunn was trying to make that as wacky as possible. You know, having the alien coming in and burning the rats. Is there really a point to that? Is that just for comedic effect? Will that have some impact later on? I don't know. I think a lot of the time with James Gunn, especially the scenes that were post-credits in this show, were not there to add any plot or any sort of further anything, any device, but it was just really there for some sort of lowbrow comedy. And I didn't feel they worked most of the time, at least for me. But then, you know, the plot starts to ramp up a little bit, and Flag is obviously after Peacemaker for killing his son, and finds out in the end. I really think that James Gunn's treatment of Rick Flag Jr. and Sr. has not been great. They were pretty decent characters in the comics, and they've been reduced to, sort of nincompoops, incompetence, or just revenge-driven sort of bad guys that you don't, you really don't look up to. Originally in the comics, both the flags were very patriotic, symbols like Captain America style personalities, but they did change in the comics over time, and I think James Gunn has gone for his own version of things in the same way he went for his own version of Clark's parents in Superman. So that was a creative choice, one I don't really agree with, but he's using these characters to drive the plot. I think there's far better ways you could have driven the plot with existing DC characters and keeping them more true to their nature than he did, but, it's his choice, and that's the way he went. And then let's go on to the cameos that were in the show. Obviously, this show is dealing with interdimensional rifts, and who does that, well in the Superman film? Well, Luthor and his gang. So Luthor's in there as a cameo scene. It was very hyped up. It was very small. It was very pointless. It really didn't need to be as hyped up as it was. For me, a better scene is when Barry meets Barry in the Flash show. That's a much better scene, much better done, much more hype for me than seeing Nicholas Hoult on the screen for a few minutes talking to Rick Flag. It doesn't really generate any tension and hype. Yeah, this is a shared universe, and I think James Gunn is trying to sprinkle things in. I mean, I like the Big Belly Burger. That was a great reference to DC Comics. I'm a big Superman fan, so having Big Belly Burger from the comics appear was great. But seeing Luthor, seeing his henchmen kind of become chummy with Flag and become almost his henchman, Flag's henchman, I mean, is that great? I just, Otis is supposed to be a nice guy. Yeah, maybe. Who cares? So, again, using these characters, I think if they added a lot of value, or you really saw something, or they were, great characters to use, brilliant. Did they need to be in it the way? I don't know. Maybe, again, James Gunn trying to push his expanded DC universe there. And the whole show was built up to that ending where, Chris has to escape the Nazi planet, but then what, right? Then what? Because that came in just before the last episode, and you're wondering, what's going to happen now. After all the crazy events of that, they did an hour-long show where he's basically moping about for a while. The entire show and the entire season hinges on the question of whether Harcourt, is in love with him or not. We all know she is. We all know that he kind of knows that, but the fact that he needs to hear it is one thing. And then showing, Harcourt and Chris and their feelings about themselves, the way that they view themselves, all of the problems that they have, was okay. I mean, as relationships go, it's going to be an interesting, fiery one. But as the writing goes, again, we've seen these types of characters before. It wasn't anything new or brilliant to watch. They acted it well. But having everything hinge on that last scene as to whether, the kiss meant anything, and showing that in flashbacks as if it's some, a pivotal moment. I don't know. James Gunn put a lot of importance into this stuff. It didn't really feel that important to me. It didn't hit home that importantly to me either. So that was one aspect. And then, of course, you have them setting up Checkmate at the end. I mean, Checkmate is a great organization in the comics. It has all these cool spy type of characters with powers, some without. And then, it really is in the background in DC doing the things that kind of Argus can't do. And is that sort of shadow world. But I'm not sure what they've made Checkmate for in this show. Good to have it there. Purpose unknown. Usage unknown. So I guess we'll have to wait and see. But weird that, it's set up by the 11th Street kids as opposed to the government, the shadowy government organization that it was in the comics. So how that will progress, I guess we'll have to wait and see. But it's just like a nod to the fact that probably there's going to be some clashes between Checkmate and Rick Flag and Checkmate and Argus going forwards. Maybe that's the way James Gunn will drive the plot for Season 3, or drive the plot in some of the expanded DC films. Who knows? We'll have to wait and see, as I said. But again, it didn't feel natural. It didn't feel organic. It didn't feel like it was paying the right tribute to the comics, which James Gunn claims he's a fan of. To me, it feels like he's just shoehorning in characters and names to further, his grand plot in his head, as opposed to giving the true fan service that I want him to have. I thought it was handled better in the Arrowverse, personally, with these types of things. But, yeah, it wasn't particularly good for me in the show. I think for me, like, the most touching scene and the most well-written scene and the most well-acted scene was Adebayo, talking to her girlfriend/wife about how they're not really meant to be together. That was brilliantly written and brilliantly acted. And if we had more of those types of season of the show, I think it would have been great. The humor didn't land very well with me. Vigilante and Adrian being a bit rude to his mother got a bit old. And some of the jokes around him knowing everything about animals got a bit ridiculous. And the fact that most of the agents joined them at the end to join in Checkmate was also a bit ridiculous. But again, I think they need that for the comedy and for the ensemble cast that James Gunn wants to use to have Peacemaker continue going forwards. I would have been happy with a show about Peacemaker going around, kicking ass, living up to his name, living up to his code, getting involved in all kinds of international scrapes. That would be good. Maybe that's what Checkmate will get him into. Him and Juno Master working together, who knows? But I think once James Gunn creates characters he likes, he wants to use them as much as possible in all different things, and it seemed that way with the ending to this show. But the ending was a bit of a letdown for most people, as I said at the start, not well rated, bit of an anticlimax. Wasn't really the action that we wanted. Them going through the doors, again, it reminded me of Shazam when they were doing it. James Gunn gets to play with his crazy imagination of ridiculous things going on behind each door. But at the same time, did it really serve the purpose other than to drive the plot to, have them leave Rick Flag and leave Argus and go form their own agency? Again, he could have done it in a better way, could have done it in a smarter way, could have done it in a funnier way. I didn't particularly find those scenes that funny. It was a very weird sort of dynamic, the way that they sort of transposed the scenes between the horror of going through the worlds and the laughter. It just got a bit awkward and uneasy and felt a bit creepy after a while, so I wasn't a big fan of the way that was done. And the music, it got a little bit tiresome, 80s rock synth, so this type of grand thing. I think if that's used sparingly, it's great. If it's used in key scenes, it's great. Over and over and over and over again, hitting you over the head with it. Yeah, I really miss the 80s and 90s too, but you can't have it as much, I think, in this show without it starting to blunt the impact that it has or lessen the effect it has in the scene. So, yeah, not a great choice for me. But well acted, as I said. It'll be interesting, as I said, to see where he goes with this stuff. A bit of a letdown. Season 2 was not as good as Season 1 for me. And let's see if there's going to be a Season 3. But there you go. That's my review of Peacemaker Season 2 and the finale. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you agree, disagree. As usual, please like, share, and subscribe to help support the channel. And catch you next time.